So on this particular day, I actually realized that maybe I'm in more trouble than I envisaged. I realized that I'm dealing with very unscrupulous characters. I had identified the fraud in the restructured installment sale agreement. Now I had just discovered a second fraud where they went to chambers to find an acting judge to fraudulently grant a default judgment whilst I'm sitting in court. So these were two very serious things. And then thirdly, they go and get the writ of execution. They come to my house at 4 o'clock in the morning with a squad. There were at least 20 policemen, and everybody was on the phone taking instructions. They were intimidating me. They were playing tricks. I just remained calm. I went to the house. I made them fresh pots of coffee. I gave them fresh scones. Then I went to my study to work. In preparation for the default judgment hearing, I had unpacked the installment sale agreement, alphabet by alphabet. And I had at least 20 points that were violations. So I was very ready for that. I knew exactly what was in the installment sale agreement. But on that day, I realized I need to look at something much higher than that. So the first thing I did was to look for the best PI, private investigator, because I wanted to understand what exactly is happening. I found a gentleman called Mr. Henry Kruger, who came from the Brixton Murder and Robbery Squad. He was recommended as a very, very meticulous private investigator. Secondly, I started preparing papers. I realized that there's an active writ of execution. So I prepared urgent papers to apply for a stay of that writ. Secondly, I prepared papers to rescind the default judgment that was granted fraudulently. Thirdly, I decided to write to the banking ombud, and I explained this entire story, adding my notes for the fraudulent installment sale agreement. Then after all those papers were ready, I then wrote a letter to Standard Bank. I addressed the letter to the head of risk and forensics. I offered myself and my daughter to be tested against the fraudulent installment sale agreement. I copied the banking ombud again. I copied joint CEOs, Mr. Ben Kruger and Mr. Sim Shabalala. I copied the head of vehicle finance. I copied the head of the fraud department. I copied all of them. And I sent the letter and I said, there is a problem. And I demand that the bank looks at this problem. I said, I understand that the CEOs have a fiduciary duty towards the bank, but this, I can invoke negligence if the CEOs are going to neglect this fraud. I'd like this fraud to be looked at, and I'm submitting myself and my daughter to be tested whichever way.